Welcome back to Bazooka Kickboxing and MMA. In today's episode, we're going to discuss 5 common mistakes strikers make when they transition into MMA. In the last couple years, we've seen a lot of kickboxers and strikers transition over to MMA. And a lot of times when they're unsuccessful, it's because of a lot of the same reasons. So in this video, I'm going to discuss 5 common mistakes we see strikers make when they transition to MMA. The first one is going to be standing too tall. When you fight in Muay Thai especially, you like to stand nice and tall and have weight distribution a lot on the back leg. By having your weight mostly on your back leg in a more narrow stance, it's easy to block with your legs. This way you can block kicks very easily, use your front kick anytime you want. But in MMA, that doesn't necessarily work in your favor. When you fight a wrestler or someone who really wants to clinch up and tie you up to take you down, you need to lower your base and get your butt behind you. So the tall position is good for using front kicks and blocking. However, it's not good when it's time to defend a takedown. If you're here to sprawl, you need to get your hips behind you, lower your base. And by standing tall, it's just more room, it's too slow, and that's what causes a lot of strikers to get taken down. So the first thing you have to learn is lower your base, get your butt behind you, and this way it's easier for you to be able to sprawl if your opponent decides to shoot. The second mistake strikers make in MMA is they tend to overthrow. In kickboxing or even boxing or Muay Thai, you have a big glove on, so you want to throw your punches as hard as you can. However, with a smaller glove, by overthrowing your punches, it just takes you out of your base and structure. Now, when I overthrow a big, powerful right hand, my weight is falling forward, so it's easily now for the wrestler to get underneath and to be able to take me down. My position, my balance is totally off. So if you want to avoid getting taken down, you have to understand how to not overthrow your punches. You have to lower a little bit, use the extension in your punch. You don't want to overthrow that weight. Yes, you might get bigger power by throwing your hip and transferring that weight, but by using more snap, extension, keeping your length, it's going to keep you away from your opponent. And you need to remember, in MMA, you have a 4-ounce glove. In kickboxing or Muay Thai, if you're over 145 pounds, you tend to fight it in a 10-ounce boxing glove. So with a 4-ounce glove, you just need to touch your opponent on the right place at the right time. It's not necessarily about strength, it's more about precision and timing. So when you're fighting MMA, focus more on those snapping types of strikes, manage your distance, and keep your feet moving. The third mistake a lot of kickboxers and Muay Thai fighters make in MMA is leading with their kicks. Kicking has to be a little bit more strategic once you get into the cage. You just don't want to lead with them at any time. Usually a wrestler is going to wait for you to shoot so they can kind of get in there, grab your legs, you're off balance, and the next thing you know, you're on your back. And you've been trying to avoid that the whole fight. So learning and understanding kick timing and how to use your kicks in MMA is slightly different. If you're gonna see someone in kickboxing, a lot of times if someone's coming in, we'll use our kicks, we'll use our knees or front kicks to be able to time our opponents. But leading with kicks in MMA, like I just mentioned, forces you sometimes to have to lean back because your opponent's pressuring you, which makes the takedown for your opponent that much more easier. So here at Bazooka Kickboxing, I always train my athletes with good timing for MMA. So the key is, if you're gonna use your kicks, especially your low kicks in MMA, try to do it on your opponent's exit. And there's different ways you can set up an exit. It can be with a feint, using jabs to get my opponent to exit. Now I can time. So I'm looking at, as my opponent retreats, that's when I use the timing rather than timing as they come in. If they're pressuring as I kick, it forces me backwards, which allows, the wrestler to continue and to chain his wrestling and takedowns. And next thing you know, I'm either against the cage or I'm on my back. The fourth mistake strikers tend to make in MMA is overthrowing in combinations. In MMA, you want to be able to hit and move if you don't want to be taken down. The moment you set your feet to be able to throw combinations, now your opponent can start changing levels, faking takedowns, and it's going to mess things up. So ideally, if you're trying not to get taken down, this is where you want to manage distance. So using singles or doubles without overthrowing, as I mentioned before, are a better key. And if you're gonna put punches and kicks in combinations, make sure your kicks are set up properly. Like I mentioned, you don't wanna lead with them. So putting combinations where you're setting up your kicks would be better than kicking, then following with your hands. So strategic combinations and not throwing very long combinations. For me, I would rather throw a jab, adjust my distance, and then maybe throw again, rather than setting my feet and throwing 4, 5, 6 strike combinations. Especially kickboxers get in the habit a lot of times of comboing in rhythm. Jab kick, 1, 2, 3 kick, 1, 2 kick. So the punch and kick combinations become very predictable and understandable. So this is where you need to change things up, be unique, mix levels, and try to set up the kick strategically. And if you know your opponent is waiting for those kicks, maybe this is where you just have to use your boxing and rely more on different skills. The fifth and final mistake strikers tend to make when they go to MMA is defending too much with the high guard. So the high guard shell you'll see a lot in Dutch kickboxing. It's a lot of time called the Dutch shell, where they kind of walk forward, pressure, and take a lot of the shots off of the forearms and the guard. But in MMA, that's not the best type of defense that you want to use. One, because it opens up holes. With the 4-ounce gloves, by me holding my head, I'm too close to my opponent and they're going to find their hooks, their punches, their uppercuts. And next thing you know, with that small glove, I can't block it and I'm getting hurt or knocked out or finished by TKO. So defensively, it's not the smartest. You want to stay away. So I have posted a video on the past for the best defense in MMA, and it's very basic. Having to use defense which keeps you away more from the strike is beneficial. So using parries or movement in your footwork are going to be safer. By using that shell, I get blinded by punches, opens holes, but the other thing is I get stuck in this shell. It's easy for the wrestler to get underneath my elbows and take me down and get me into those body locks. The best way to defend a shot is to get the underhook. By defending punches here, if most wrestlers don't just shoot from the outside, they'll set it up with their strikes. By throwing a few bombing strikes, if the kickboxer blocks this way, right away, the wrestler's gonna get underneath and take them down. The underhook is no longer an option. So it's important to move your feet, use your parries, and it's all about footwork and setting things up with feinting and distance control. Right? So kickboxing, you can get away with that head-to-head fighting. Still in MMA if you're really good. I'm someone who has used the shell my entire career, so I'm confident to use a shell with a 4-ounce glove, but only for those moments in ranges. Otherwise, I'm maintaining distance and using my parries and long defense. So remember, you need to understand striking and MMA, yes, they look very similar, but there are a lot of differences. The small ounce glove makes a big difference. And I always talk about the big glove and the small glove as football versus rugby. The big glove, you have that confidence to just throw and smash as hard as you can. Right? That's like the football player. But when you play rugby and you take away all that equipment, you need to be more precise the way you dive in with your head, the way you make your tackles, because the consequences are greater. And that's very similar to what you'll notice with kickboxing versus MMA. In kickboxing, you tend to get that head-to-head fighting, a lot of shin and banged up damage off your forearms. But MMA, you get a lot of hand breaks. It's maybe less volume, but one shot can make a big difference. So just be aware that they are two different types of sports. And as a martial artist, if you plan on fighting between kickboxing and Muay Thai and MMA, that you must understand the differences and to be able to practice and to be able to do it all and have the ability to adapt. And I hope that watching this channel gives you enough information and teaches you how to adapt between those different styles. It's all about one way. It's good to know one way, but it's also important to understand that that one way might not work all the time. So you might have to go into the bank, think back at some of my old videos to pick up some nuggets to be able to help you in those situations when you are forced to adapt. So I hope you're liking these videos, you're subscribed, and you're sharing with your friends. Hit the notification bell to stay up to date, and make sure you keep following us here at Bazooka Kickboxing and MMA.